The history of Mesa and the Salt River Valley dates back almost 2,000 years ago to a tribe known as the Hohokam. The Hohokam built the first canal system that made life and agriculture possible in this arid desert climate. They carved these canals out by hand with tools made from stones and sticks, using baskets to haul rocks and debris. They were responsible for digging over 125 miles of canals and irrigating over 100,000 acres of farmland in the Salt River Valley. The Hohokam farmed the valley until the mid-15th century, when they suddenly disappeared from the landscape. Their descendants, the Pima, resettled the valley during the 18th century and lived a largely undisturbed lifestyle until the Anglo-American pioneers began arriving after the Civil War. In 1877, Brigham Young sent the first pioneers from Utah to Mesa to help support the Mormon Church's southern expansion. These early Mormon settlers were known as the Utah Company and settled in what is now Lehi. They would need to bring water to their new settlement, and the men of this company would rely on the knowledge of the ancient Hohokam people, uncovering enormous areas of rich river bottomland under their feet. To their amazement, these early canal heads were still usable. The men had to dig the first canals by hand with shovels and pickaxe, and eventually they began using the more efficient scoops or shovels. The Mesa Company followed in 1878 and settled in what is now downtown Mesa. Farming has always been central to the success of Mesa. While the men were digging the canals, the women and children were tending the home gardens. In the kitchen garden, women and children planted squash, corn and beans, as well as potatoes and greens. Citrus trees bearing lemons, limes, grapefruits, and oranges would eventually become a major source of income. Flour milling was an important industry in Mesa many years ago to help process grains from local farmers. While most people know Arizona as the Grand Canyon state, the building blocks of its early economy included the 5 C's: citrus, cotton, cattle, copper, and climate. Citrus trees are abundant in Arizona, including lemons, limes, oranges, and grapefruits. Today, Arizona remains a leading cotton state. In the early 1900s, cattle accounted for nearly 50% of the state's economy. Today, however, it's closer to 5%, but cows can still be found in all of Arizona's 15 counties. By 1863, nearly a quarter of Arizonans were mining for metals. Copper ore is still mined in the state for many different uses, including wire and coins. Arizona boasts over 300 days of sunshine a year and an average temperature of 75 degrees, making it a top tourist destination for its climate. Early Mesa women found a variety of ways to entertain themselves in the days before every home had electricity. Quilting, sewing, knitting, and crocheting were both necessary chores and a form of entertainment for many. These activities were often done socially, with women forming sewing circles or cooperatively making quilts. Ranching became an important industry in the East Valley area, as it was in much of Arizona. The newly dug canals made it possible to cultivate thousands of acres of alfalfa, grain, and other crops. This in turn increased the number of cows the area could support. By 1907, the number of livestock in the area had grown to such an extent that it was not uncommon for cattle and horses to be seen freely roaming the streets of the town. Sheep were also an important industry for the people of Mesa in its first decades. In the early 1900s, tens of thousands of sheep grazed in the alfalfa pastures each year. In the years before the railroad reached many Arizona towns, cattle had to be herded many miles from the ranch, which could take days or even weeks. Cattle are often scattered across thousands of acres over rough terrain. Seasonal roundups are still carried out on ranches across the state each year. Much as was done over 100 years ago, cowboys and cowgirls saddle up their horses to gather scattered cows. In the days before the railroad, Mesa residents had to be largely self-reliant. This resulted in producing many of the goods necessary for creating a life in their new desert home. A lack of access to industrial processes also meant that any goods brought with the first Mesa residents had to be repaired if they broke. The role of the blacksmith, the leather worker, and other craftsmen became vital to the young town. a town blacksmith created many of the tools that helped make the lives of their fellow townspeople easier. Blacksmiths manufactured everything from horseshoes and nails to knives and metal bands for barrels.